Good morning. This morning it is July the 8th. It's a Thursday today. And this week with John Stott, he's taking us through Paul's letter to the Galatians and to the Thessalonians. And we have finally moved out of Galatians and into First Thessalonians. This morning the suggested reading is First Thessalonians chapter 1, verses 1 through 10. And the reading comes from within that passage, the lead-in reading. Our gospel came to you. You welcomed the message. The Lord's message rang out from you. That's from 1 Thessalonians 1, 5, and 6, and then on to 8. Our gospel came to you. You welcomed the message. The Lord's message rang out from you. Sounds like a pretty good three-point sermon to me. I'll have to jot that down. Evangelism through the local church is the title of today's devotion. Evangelism through the local church. Paul began his first letter to the Thessalonians by reminding them of his visit. He described it in three stages. Firstly, our gospel came to you. It came with words because it has a specific content. But not with words only. For words spoken in human weakness need to be confirmed with divine power. The gospel also came to them with deep conviction. If power describes the objective impact of the preaching, conviction describes the subjective state of the preachers. Moreover, the truth of the word, the conviction with which it was spoken, and the power of its impact all stemmed from the Holy Spirit. Truth, conviction, and power are still three essential characteristics of authentic Christian preaching. Secondly, you welcomed the message. There had been severe suffering, for the true gospel always arouses hostility, but there is also joy when the gospel is received. The same Holy Spirit who gave power to those who preached the gospel gave joy to those who received it. He was working at both ends of the communication process. The converts also became imitators of Christ and his apostles and a model to believers because they had been transformed. And thirdly, the Lord's message rang out from you. The Greek verb can mean to sound, ring, peal, or boom. Chrysostom's an early church father. Chrysostom thought that Paul was likening the preaching of the gospel to the sound of a loud trumpet. At all events, the gospel proclaimed by the Thessalonians made a loud noise that seemed to reverberate through the hills and valleys of Greece. 2 points stand out in this first chapter of 1 Thessalonians. Firstly, the church that receives the gospel must pass it on. Nothing is more impressive than the sequence, our gospel came to you, you welcomed the message, the Lord's message rang out from you. This seems to be God's simplest plan for the spread of the good news throughout the world. Secondly, the church that passes on the gospel must embody it. The news of the transformation of the Thessalonians was spreading automatically, and the missionaries even felt redundant. I believe for every, they use the term loosely, good missionary, that's the purpose. That we won't be needed here anymore. We move on to the next place that needs to hear and bring them to the same place. I had been reading a book, I believe its original date of publication was back in the 1920s. And that's how he sees it as well. It's not how many see the mission of the church these days. We've received the gospel. We accepted the gospel. Now we've got to tell others. Now we've got to proclaim it. We find it so easy to talk about so many different things. Grandparents do not need to be taught how to share news about the grandkids because they love them so much they just want to talk about them and show pictures. Some people don't need to be coached on how to talk about their favorite sport team. They just like them. And so it's easy for them to talk about it. I believe the same should be true for us as believers. We love Jesus so much. It should be easy for us to talk about him, share the truth of him with others. Our lives should be transformed by his presence in our lives. Not just be Christians in name only, but Christians in reality. Followers of Christ, whose lives have been changed and transformed. When we share that with others, some will be touched and moved, others will be repulsed. But that goes with the territory. That's a great 3-point step. Our gospel came to you. You welcomed the message. And the Lord's message rang out from you. May the Lord's message ring out from our lives today and every day. Blessings.